Chapter 20. The Great Escape, Part 1. The hum of the manual vehicle filled the air, a soft, resonant sound that felt almost surreal as Lucas, Mina, and Thomas sat in the cramped space of the pod van. The researcher, a man whose intentions remained as murky as the storm brewing beyond the city's western limits, gripped the steering wheel with a tension that mirrored the unease radiating from the group. They had made the decision to head to the Dwarves Mountains, an instinctive move born from desperation and a flicker of hope. But as the researcher drove them deeper into uncertainty, the shadows of their past loomed ever larger. The streets of Kingston blurred past the large front window, every corner they turned revealing more chaos than the last. They had narrowly escaped the clutches of municipal security, but the weight of their flight pressed heavily upon them. Lucas felt it in the exhaustion weighing on his limbs, a fatigue that gnawed at the edges of his telepathic control. He had pushed himself too far, using his powers to escape the researcher's grasp, and now he was reaping the consequences. The pulsing energy of the magical grid beneath Hybris felt distant, like a whisper he could no longer hear. Mina sat beside him, her gaze fixed on the road ahead, but Lucas could sense her battle against sleep. The adrenaline from their earlier encounter was fading, and he knew it wouldn't be long before she succumbed to exhaustion. They were both on the edge of collapse, but for now they held on, refusing to let the impending storm snatch away their chance at survival. "Are you sure about this?" the researcher asked, breaking the silence that had settled like a thick fog in the van. His voice held a calmness that belied the urgency of their situation. "You could come with me to my home. I have resources that could help you both." Lucas narrowed his eyes, sensing the underlying manipulation in the researcher's words. "And what if we refuse? What if we just want to get out of Kingston?" "There are ways to go about this," the researcher insisted, his voice rising slightly, a hint of impatience creeping in. "If Kingston security is on high alert, the mountains won't be safe. They're looking for you. You need to trust me." "Trust." The word echoed in Lucas's mind like a taunt. He glanced at Mina, whose eyelids fluttered as if trying to stave off sleep. He couldn't let her slip away. Not now. Not when every moment counted. "Trust is hard to come by," he said finally, his tone even. "Especially after everything." "Everything," the researcher echoed, his gaze momentarily flicking to the rearview mirror. "If you'd only consider—" Lucas cut him off. "We've made our decision. We're heading west." The researcher's expression shifted, a flicker of something, perhaps frustration or resignation, passing over his features. "Fine," he replied tersely. "But you need to understand that the exits are likely barred. They'll be expecting you to try to leave." The words sent a chill through Lucas. He had hoped that their frantic escape would take them out of Kingston before the authorities caught wind of their movements. "What do you mean?" he demanded, his heart racing as images of being trapped flooded his mind. "Just what I said," the researcher replied, his voice steady. "Kingston security doesn't take threats lightly, and you're a significant threat right now." They continued through the winding streets, and Lucas felt his frustration mounting. The researcher's insistence on steering them toward his so-called sanctuary only deepened his suspicions. It felt as if he were playing a dangerous game, pulling strings from the shadows. Lucas focused on the road ahead, determined to keep the group together. "Let's find a way out of here," Thomas said suddenly, his voice breaking the tension. "If we can remember an old route, we might have a chance." Mina shifted in her seat, her head bobbing slightly as she fought against the pull of sleep. "I think there was a way through the older part of the city," she murmured, her words trailing off as she stifled a yawn. "Focus, Mina," Lucas said, his voice firm yet gentle. "We need you awake." She blinked, shaking her head as if to clear the fog. "Right. There's a section with abandoned buildings. If we can get through there, it might lead us to the outskirts." "Then let's find it," Lucas urged. "We can't sit idle and wait for them to catch up." The researcher frowned, glancing at the two of them. "You're putting yourselves at risk," he warned, but Lucas could feel the resolve in his own heart strengthening. "Better to take a risk than to sit here and do nothing," Lucas shot back. "You've made it clear you want to control our fate. We'll take our chances." As they navigated deeper into Kingston, the atmosphere grew more tense. They had yet to encounter any roadblocks, but Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, a sensation that clawed at the back of his mind like a lingering shadow. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance, a haunting reminder of the danger closing in. Suddenly, the researcher swerved sharply, his expression tight with concentration. "There's a blockage ahead," he said, his voice low. "I can't see what's beyond it, but we should." A piercing alarm shattered the air, echoing through the streets as bright lights flared to life. Lucas's heart sank. They were already too late. Kingston security had tightened its grip. "We can't go back," Thomas exclaimed, his voice rising in panic. "We have to find another way." "I'm looking for options," the researcher snapped, his hands tightening around the wheel as he searched for an escape route. "If we can circle around—" "No," Lucas interrupted, the urgency in his voice startling even him. "We need to think. Where do we go? We can't let them trap us." As if on cue, the sound of engines roared to life behind them, the unmistakable hum of security pods moving swiftly through the streets. They were closing in, and panic threatened to bubble to the surface. Mina, sensing the tension, took a deep breath. "I know an old way, but it'll be tight. We might need to disguise the van if we're going to get out of here." "Disguise?" the researcher repeated, skepticism clear in his voice. "You think that will work?" "Better than just sitting here waiting for them," Lucas retorted. "We need to find an old warehouse or something. If we can find paint, we can at least cover the logo." "There's an abandoned warehouse I know of, not far from here," Mina said, her voice steadier now. "If we can make it there in time, it might just work." The researcher sighed, clearly unwilling but recognizing the desperation in their eyes. "Lead the way," he relented, albeit reluctantly. "But if we're caught, this is on you." Lucas felt a rush of determination. "Let's go." They made their way through the back streets of Kingston, avoiding the main thoroughfares as sirens blared ominously in the distance. The weight of their decision pressed on them, but they had no other choice. Minutes felt like hours as they navigated the alleys, and Lucas could feel the tension in the van as they passed through dimly lit corners, where the shadows seemed to stretch and reach for them. Finally, the researcher slowed the vehicle in front of a crumbling warehouse, its windows shattered and walls adorned with graffiti that spoke of a forgotten era. "This is it," Mina said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to move fast." They piled out of the van, the cool air hitting them like a wave of relief after the stifling heat inside. Lucas took a moment to gather his thoughts, trying to shake off the wariness that threatened to consume him. "Let's find those spray cans," Thomas urged, scanning the interior of the warehouse. "We need to disguise the van before they come any closer." Inside, the warehouse was dark and musty, the air thick with the scent of mildew and decay. They moved cautiously, the faint light from the front window casting long shadows that danced across the floor. "Over here," Thomas called out, his voice echoing in the stillness. He had found a stack of old paint cans, the colors faded and peeling. "This should do it." "Good," Lucas replied, relief flooding him. "Let's get started." They set to work quickly, the sound of cans rattling and the faint hiss of paint filling the air as they sprayed over the van's identifying marks. Lucas could hear sirens drawing closer, a reminder that time was slipping away. As they worked, Thomas's eyes darted to the corner of the warehouse where an old display screen sat forgotten in the shadows. His curiosity piqued. He moved closer, wiping the dust from the screen with his sleeve. "Hey, look at this," he called to the others, his voice tinged with excitement. "It still works." Mina paused, paint can in hand, as she moved to join him. "What is it?" Thomas fiddled with the controls, and the screen flickered to life, displaying a news report. "It's about us," he exclaimed, shock rippling through his voice. "Listen." Lucas and Mina hurried over, their hearts pounding as they leaned closer to the screen. The news anchor spoke urgently about a major security breach, detailing the escape of 2 fugitives with extraordinary abilities. "Lucas," the anchor said, the words striking like a hammer. "The authorities urge anyone with information to come forward. These individuals are considered dangerous and should not be approached." The report continued, detailing the chaos that had erupted in Kingston following their escape, a whirlwind of fear and confusion that painted them as monsters rather than survivors. "This is bad," Mina said, her voice trembling slightly. We're in deeper trouble than we thought. Lucas felt a surge of anger. They're twisting the narrative. They want everyone to see us as threats. Maybe this isn't the best place to watch this, the researcher suggested, his voice laced with unease. We can't afford to be here if they're broadcasting about us. But Thomas's eyes were glued to the screen, his expression shifting from shock to determination. We need to know everything. They could be setting traps, and if we don't have a clear picture, we're walking blind. Turn it off, Lucas urged, but a part of him knew they had to understand the stakes. Thomas reluctantly muted the sound, but the scrolling text continued to share their story with the world. We're already in the spotlight, he said, and we need to prepare for what's next. Mina glanced at Lucas, her expression resolute despite the fear lurking behind her eyes. We'll figure this out. We can't let them control our fate. As they resumed disguising the van, Lucas felt the weight of the situation pressing heavily on him. The storm outside rumbled ominously, echoing the turmoil within him. They were on the run, faced with a world that had turned against them, but together they would carve their own path forward. Time ticked away, the hum of their surroundings fading into the background as they fought against the odds. Lucas could feel the pull of exhaustion threatening to drag him under, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. They needed to escape. They needed to survive. And no matter what happened, they would not be caught.